Your client's CFO just tried to expense a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle and a pair of Laubautins, Claire said, setting the receipts on the boardroom table with surgical calm. Around her, 3 junior analysts stopped pretending to type. The whiskey I get. But unless he's moonlighting as a drag queen, I'm gonna flag the heels. No one laughed, not because it wasn't funny, but because no one wanted to admit Claire was still running this audit from the shadows. She wasn't supposed to be in that room. Not anymore. Derek Lanning had made sure of that. But that didn't stop Claire Donovan from doing what she did best, keeping billion-dollar messes from going thermonuclear. Even if it meant she did it with one foot in exile and the other stomping on the panic button. Halberg and Rice Consulting liked to pretend it was a meritocracy. That's why they put Claire on the website's Women in Leadership page, even though she hadn't led a major audit in over a year. That's why they gave her the new associates to mentor, even though she was the one who'd found the $8.3M shortfall in the biotech deal last March, while Derek was too busy golfing with the client's COO to notice the fire. That's why when the boardroom cleared, Derek strolled in 10 minutes late, reeking of expensive cologne and entitlement, leaned over the table, and muttered like he was reading from a script. Appreciate the assist, Claire. But let's be honest, our client won't follow a woman. She didn't flinch, didn't look up. Just slid the expense report his way and said, make sure your boy deducts the Laubautins under delusions of grandeur. Then walked out before she stabbed him with a mechanical pencil. And listen, if you're hearing this and thinking, hell yes, Claire, you tell him, you might want to hit that little subscribe button. Seriously, it's free, takes half a second, and 97% of folks just listen without doing it. Meanwhile, we've got a whole team running on cold brew and rage bringing you stories like this one. So go on, tap that sub, let's keep going. Back in her cubicle, cubicle after 15 years, Claire took off her blazer, exhaled through her teeth, and opened the audit logs she wasn't technically supposed to have access to anymore. Not that it was going to stop her. The guy in security still owed her for helping his wife land a green card interview. The file loaded slow, the system was old. Half the icons still looked like they were built in 2003. But when the numbers finally appeared, she saw what she always saw, sloppiness masquerading as genius. Derek had signed off on quarterly financials that included, that was interesting. She blinked, clicked, zoomed. 3 invoices dated within the same week, same vendor, same amount, right down to the penny. All labeled consulting services. All under $10K, which meant they didn't trigger a full procurement audit. A cute trick. One Claire had seen before. She cross-referenced with payment logs. Yep, same routing number, different shell LLCs, and the signature on one of them, her own, except she never signed it. It wasn't just a forged signature. It was an idiotic forged signature. Whoever did it hadn't matched the slant on her capital D. That D always dipped left, decades of Catholic school cursive drills hardwired into her muscle memory. Claire sat back, heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to anticipation. 15 years of being the fixer, the handler, the cleanup crew. 15 years of making egotistical partners look good while she got handed pink-washed initiatives and told to smile more. 15 years of being passed over, talked over, walked past. And now Derek had not only sidelined her, he'd forged her name on fraudulent filings. She should have felt scared, should have called legal, should have booked a spa day and stress-sobbed into a lavender robe. Instead, she opened a new folder on her encrypted drive. She named it Buried Bones, and then she smiled, just barely. The kind of smile that would have made Derek sweat if he'd seen it. Claire Donovan wasn't done. She was just getting precise. Claire wasn't stupid enough to send the files over company email. Halberg and Rice had transparency values the way a feral raccoon has table manners, loud in theory, but garbage in practice. She encrypted the files twice, backed them up to a thumb drive she'd labeled meal prep ideas, and slipped it into the Altoids tin in her purse. No one questioned the Altoids tin. Claire had a reputation for being organized, which was HR speak for terrifying in a cardigan. Her official assignment now? Compliance Training Refresh Series. Translation: babysitting a bunch of 27-year-olds in khakis who thought PowerPoint animation meant professional charisma. It was a joke. Derek's idea of a promotion was throwing her into the windowless third-floor conference room, where the lights buzzed like a dying fly, and the whiteboard still had Q3 budget hellscape, faintly visible beneath layers of dry erase ghosts. But every time she clicked through another slide about data hygiene, she was also cross-referencing invoices from 3 separate quarters. She built a spreadsheet that would have made the SEC weep, coded inconsistencies by color, added notes in a dead language only she and one other person would understand, because if she was going down, she wasn't going down without insurance. That one other person? Thomas Leary. Tom had been her mentor back in the day, back when she still believed audits were about truth and not golf trips. He was the one who taught her to follow the money and the metadata. These days, Tom worked at the Office of Corporate Financial Oversight, which sounded boring as hell until you realized it was the agency that made billionaires cry behind closed doors. She hadn't spoken to him in 2 years, but she had his private line. She took a walk at lunch, left her company phone in her desk drawer, and used a burner she kept in her glove box, next to an expired granola bar and a tire gauge that didn't work. 2 rings, then a voice that still sounded like whiskey and gravel. "Donovan, it's me." Long pause. "You calling me from prison or planning to put someone there?" "I'm not sure yet," she said. "But if I can document what I think I just found, we might have an issue." Another pause, which firm, she told him. He hissed through his teeth like he'd stepped on a Lego. "Halberg's been on our radar, but we couldn't get a foothold. Check your inbox in 20 minutes. You'll have a foothold and a whole damn femur." He chuckled. "Still dramatic. You taught me well." She hung up before her hands could shake. Back at her desk, the world looked the same: beige walls, blinking cursor, Derek's voice somewhere in the distance loudly misusing the word synergy. But inside Claire, something tectonic had shifted. She didn't just want to survive this anymore. She wanted a name, and she wanted his. By midnight, she'd mapped out a full money trail from Halberg's largest client through 2 shell companies and back into a real estate venture owned by Derek's college roommate. She cross-checked their vacation photos on Instagram. Yep, same guy. Same yacht. Same #boysabrunch caption with enough risque to drown a horse. Claire sat in the blue glow of her monitor, glasses sliding down her nose, heart humming like a live wire. She felt the way she used to before exams, nervous, focused, dangerous with knowledge. She didn't sleep, she didn't need to. The next morning, her compliance training group got a new instructor. Claire had been reassigned, again. She smiled politely, shook the new hire's hand, and walked straight into a private booth in the nearby coworking lounge. She opened her laptop, connected to a secure VPN, and uploaded the file marked Redacted Findings, Preliminary. 15 minutes later, her burner lit up. Tom's message was simple. "Let's talk formal audit. Your lead." Claire stared at the screen, unblinking. She'd just been handed the matchbook. Now all she had to do was light the fuse. The day after Tom's text, Claire sat across from HR like she was auditioning for a part she didn't want in a play she planned to burn down. Rebecca from People and Culture, who wore beige like it was a calling, offered her a peppermint tea and the kind of smile you'd expect from someone euthanizing your cat. "Claire, I just want to say how much we value your leadership style. So approachable, so grounded." Claire blinked once. "I've been called worse. We're launching a new firm-wide initiative, Ethics, Equity, and Empowerment, E3 for short. We thought you'd be perfect to lead it." There it was, the exile, dressed up like a promotion and handed to her like a gift box that reeked of mothballs and missed opportunities. Claire saw the move for what it was, a padded cell with a LinkedIn filter. "I'm flattered," she said, voice sugar-coated in just enough false humility to sound believable. "Derek actually mentioned this to me. I think he's really trying to push the firm forward." Rebecca's eyebrows arched like a cartoon villain's. "That's so wonderful to hear. He speaks so highly of you." He wouldn't, but Claire smiled and nodded as if he'd sent her flowers with a handwritten note that didn't contain the word optics. Inside, she could feel the scream building in her throat like steam behind a cracked dam. But the game was clear now. Claire knew how this went. Praise him in public, praise him in meetings, act so blessed to be noticed. Let him think she was flattered. Let him think she was grateful. She updated her LinkedIn bio that night to include head of E3 initiative, redefining corporate integrity. It made her want to vomit, but it worked. Derek reposted it with a comment, "So proud to have Claire on our leadership team. #one firm, one vision." Claire almost choked on her wine. The junior associates started inviting her to lunch again. One asked if she was tight with Derek now. She laughed like a woman who'd found inner peace and not a forged signature linking her name to felony-level fraud. She played the part, sat in meetings, smiled through PowerPoints, even complimented Derek's strategic oversight during an all-hands call, right as she emailed Tom a fresh batch of bank transfers connecting Halberg's client to a charity that didn't technically exist. At night, she built her own kind of training manual, a digital vault organized with timelines, receipts, login trails, metadata tags. Each file was another inch of rope in the noose. But some nights she couldn't help wondering, what if this is career suicide? Halberg was old money. Derek's last name still got him invited to fundraisers that charged 10 grand a plate. Claire had no backup plan, no safety net, no trust fund, just a weathered resume, a wicked sense of pattern recognition, and a tendency to believe the truth mattered more than male egos in navy suits. She'd worked too hard to get here. 15 years of outlasting every layoff, surviving every merger, eating crap with a thank you smile. Maybe it was smarter to keep her head down. Maybe no one would believe her. Maybe Tom would get cold feet. Maybe this would all end in a quiet exit package, and her name struck from the firm directory like a typo. She sat at her desk, staring at the blinking cursor in her audit notes, fingers frozen above the keyboard. And then Derek walked by, talking too loudly on his phone. "No, she's perfect for this PR stuff. Smart enough to sell it. Too risk-averse to blow anything up." That was it. Something inside her clicked, not like a spark, more like a lock turning. She minimized her notes, opened a clean document, and started writing the formal summary draft Tom had requested. She called it Preliminary Timeline of Financial Discrepancies. Subject, Derek Lanning. Career suicide? Maybe, but Claire had never liked safe bets. She liked clean ones. Claire's cursor hovered over the final cell in her spreadsheet like a sniper's finger on a trigger. Every box was filled. Every line item color-coded. Every dollar accounted for, or, in Derek's case, misaccounted and rerouted through enough shell games to make a Vegas pit boss blush. It had taken her 6 weeks of working nights, pretending to lead ethics workshops by day while quietly compiling a financial murder map after dark. Each new entry read like a confession, Derek's initials on sign-offs that didn't match the corresponding account activity, vendor names that resolved to defunct websites, timestamps that overlapped with his golf trips and client dinners in Aspen. And then came the crown jewel, a scanned PDF from last fiscal year, buried in a Q2 folder labeled Final Use This Own. Claire knew her own signature. She'd written it hundreds of times on thousands of pages, but this one was off like a bad imitation of a song you once loved. The loops were too rounded, the pressure inconsistent. Someone had dragged her name across the page like a forger tracing a ghost. They hadn't just used her name. It used it to greenlight a 7-figure consulting payout to a strategic research firm registered in Delaware. That firm, it turned out, shared an address with Derek's college roommate's boutique wine company. Cute. Claire didn't react. No rage, no panic. She just clicked save as, titled the file Donovan's signature forgery PDF, and placed it into a folder already labeled Evidence Phase 2. By that point, she'd already built an encrypted document vault for the oversight board. She'd been careful, sent an anonymous query through their whistleblower portal, just enough to catch interest. Tom had warned her they wouldn't move until they had irrefutable documentation. Not a theory, not a vibe. Claire had delivered a dossier so detailed it had mere data on top of mere data. She hit upload, then she waited. For 32 hours, nothing happened. Her stomach knotted. Maybe she'd gone too far. Maybe the board would kick it back. Maybe Derek would catch wind and twist it into a vendetta story. Maybe her name would end up on some unofficial blacklist where not a team player is code for we don't like loud women with evidence. Then her secure inbox pinged. Subject, submission received escalated to board review body. Thank you. The Financial Oversight Board has assigned a third-party audit, who are recommended as lead due to subject familiarity and chain of custody, awaiting formal appointment pending internal vetting. Claire stared at the screen, unblinking. The words didn't feel real. Her name, lead auditor, formal appointment. A low laugh slipped from her throat, surprised, sharp, disbelieving. She wasn't just fighting back anymore. She was stepping into the light and dragging Derek's lies with her. By the following Monday, the official assignment came through. Subject, Halberg and Rice Consulting Independent Financial Audit. Auditor in charge, Claire M. Donovan. She printed it out, held the paper like it was holy, then slipped it into a plain black folder and filed it in her locked drawer, right next to the company's branded values statement coaster, now stained with sarcasm and cabernet. The next day, Claire walked into the office earlier than usual. Derek was already there, holding court by the espresso machine, retelling some recycled story about landing the Burnley account. Claire walked past without a word, didn't flinch when he said her name like it tasted bitter. She just smiled ever so slightly. Because now his name was sitting on an audit request on a federal server under her authority. He whispered once that clients won't follow a woman, but the oversight board just had. Claire didn't build a team. She curated a firing squad. First up was Anita Polk, former forensic accountant turned single malt connoisseur, who once found a $12 million offshore stash by reverse engineering a caterer's invoice. Claire had worked with her during the Hightower debacle and knew Anita could smell cooked books like a bloodhound sniffing out barbecue. Then came Jules Tran, the quiet compliance analyst with the photographic memory and the poker face of a taxidermied owl. No one ever saw Jules coming until the subpoenas dropped. Last was Martin Aucaffer, cybersecurity specialist and gentle chaos merchant, who'd once hacked a hedge fund's VPN mid-flight because the in-flight movie was the boss baby. He was technically overqualified. Perfect. Each call was short. Claire didn't beg, didn't explain. Just sent NDAs, said the magic words, "It's Lanning," and they were in. By the end of the week, their war room was a bland rental suite in a nondescript tower 6 blocks from Halberg and Rice. The team called it the guillotine because Martin taped a tiny paper guillotine to the door with Derek's face on the blade. They worked in silence and in sync. Everyone had a piece of the machine to dissect. Anita dug into vendor shells and cash flow patterns. Jules traced internal approval logs with timestamp comparisons. Martin combed the firm's internal network traffic with quiet glee, muttering, "Derek, you greasy bastard," every time he found another lazy login. Claire moved between them like a conductor, calm and methodical. She'd never felt more in control. Meanwhile, back at Halberg, Derek started sniffing around. It began with harmless questions. "You still doing those ethics slides?" He'd ask in the break room, fake casual, sipping a green smoothie like it was court mandated. Claire nodded. "I'm learning a lot about myself. Really leaning into integrity these days." He smirked, but his eyes twitched. Next came the IT requests. Claire got flagged by internal systems when Derek attempted to access her compliance drive. Not subtle, not smart, so she left him breadcrumbs. A few benign file names, some non-critical log exports, a sanitized vendor list with one real anomaly buried just deep enough for him to find. And he did. 3 days later, he showed up at her desk. No appointment, no pretense. Got a minute? He asked, smile tight as his collar. Claire looked up, blinked once, of course. He sat across from her, leaned in too close. Look, I know things have been weird, but I've always respected your instincts. She tilted her head, playing dumb. Thanks, Derek. That's very evolved of you. I just want to be sure you're not letting paranoia cloud your judgment. These audits. You know how they can spiral. Would hate for your name to get pulled into anything messy. She didn't blink. Oh, I agree, documentation is everything. He smiled again, more teeth, less charm. Good, good, because if this gets out of hand, it won't just be me who looks bad. Claire leaned back, eyes cool. Are you threatening me? He raised both palms. Of course not. I'm just saying careers are delicate things. One bad narrative and well, you get it. She reached into her drawer, pulled out a red folder and placed it between them. Inside, nothing, just a decoy. He stared at it like it might explode. Anything else? She asked, already turning back to her screen. He hesitated, then stood. Let's just keep communication open, yeah? Claire smiled. Always. The moment he left, she opened the encrypted recording app on her phone and saved the audio file she'd been capturing since he sat down. The next day, he tried again. This time it was charm. Caught her near the elevator, hand brushing her arm like they were old friends sharing a secret. Claire, remember that night in Boston? The biotech win? You and me closing that deal? You had that red dress on, God, you owned that room. We made magic that night. She stared at him, expression unreadable. We didn't, she said flatly. You passed out on a conference call, and I pulled the deal together while your assistant was Googling how to revive you with espresso shots. He chuckled awkwardly, but his eyes darted. Come on, don't be like that. You know we've always had something. She hit save on her voice memo app again and stepped onto the elevator without looking back. Inside, alone, she exhaled slowly. The mask stayed on, but the blade was nearly ready. Derek picked the restaurant like a man trying to impress himself. One of those subterranean steakhouse temples with a name like Carbon and menus printed in gold leaf that curled from the heat of their own pretension. Booths were tucked into black lacquer alcoves, music too low to dance to but too loud for discretion. It reeked of forced class and dry-aged arrogance. Claire walked in precisely 5 minutes late. Not fashionably, not apologetically, just late enough to remind everyone she was there on her terms. Her suit was slate gray, perfectly tailored, sharp enough to insult someone. Minimal jewelry, hair swept into a knot so severe it probably had its own NDA. She didn't bother with a handbag, just carried a leather portfolio like it was loaded. Derek's smirk faltered the second he saw her. Claire, he said, standing halfway like a man caught between two instincts, fight or grovel. Think you'd make it. She tilted her head, pleasant. Well, the board did ask me personally to attend, that did it. Derek blinked once, slow. Across the table sat Margaret Serrano, CEO of Halberg's largest client and the reason for this very audit. Her eyes, cool and observant, flicked from Derek to Claire like she'd just seen a magician's sleight fail in real time. You know each other? Margaret asked. Derek laughed too loud. Oh yes, Claire and I go way back. She's been running our internal compliance refresh series. Claire smiled, and the biotech misstatements, that too. Silence. Margaret leaned in, interested. That was you? Claire nodded, sipping her water. $250,000 misclassification flagged in a 4-line disclosure buried inside a supplemental report. Easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Margaret turned to Derek, one brow lifting. Thought your name was on that file. Derek coughed into his napkin, muttered something about collaborative effort. Claire didn't press. She didn't have to. The power had shifted and the table felt it. The waiter brought wine, and overpriced red Derek had chosen without consulting anyone. Claire declined. She needed her edge sharp. The rest of the evening played out like a doomed musical. Derek led with hollow charm, tried to steer the conversation toward firm vision, best practices, and long-term alignment. Claire said very little, but when she did, it cut. When he praised internal cohesion, she gently mentioned her team's independence. When he name-dropped the oversight board, she casually reminded Margaret that she had direct correspondence with 2 members of the committee, just to ensure transparency. At one point, Derek tried to steer the conversation toward Claire's journey at the firm, clearly hoping she'd play the modest underdog. Instead, she smiled politely. Oh, it's been quite a road. I've had the privilege of solving problems others didn't even know existed. Margaret chuckled at that, short and sharp. Well, I'm glad you're on our side this time. Claire inclined her head. Me too. Later, as they waited for the check, Derek leaned over under the pretense of asking about logistics. You're enjoying this, he whispered, a little too close. You think this is a game? She turned her head slowly, met his eyes without blinking. I think the board already picked the winner. Then she turned back to Margaret, who was busy signing off on tomorrow's on-site audit with Claire's name listed first in the welcome brief. By the time they left the restaurant, Claire was practically floating. Not because she'd won yet, but because she'd seen the future flicker in Derek's panicked smile and Margaret's measured nod. Tomorrow, the audit began. Tonight, the stage was hers. And Derek, he finally understood he wasn't the main character anymore. The conference room was cold, windowless, and unforgiving, just how Claire liked it. A long steel table stretched across the center, littered with bottled water, stale muffins, and tension. On one side sat Margaret Serrano and her executive team, composed, curious, and increasingly skeptical. On the other, Claire and her audit squad, each with identical black folders and expressions like corporate snipers on retainer. Derek, flanked by Halberg's in-house counsel and a visibly sweating junior associate, looked like a man trying to remember if he locked the door to his secrets. Claire clicked the remote. Slide 1, the Halberg organizational chart. Slide 2, the financial flow of consulting fees over a 3-year period. Slide 3, the inconsistencies. Let's begin with vendor 43A, Claire said, voice steady, unhurried, approved under discretionary spend. 3 payments of $9,870 each, processed within 5 days of one another. Same vendor alias, 3 separate LLCs. Derek cleared his throat. That's not uncommon. Many firms. Claire didn't look at him. She clicked again. Slide 4, a scanned invoice. Signature at the bottom. Hers. These were submitted under my name, Claire said, holding up a crisp, printed copy as she slid it across the table to Margaret. I did not authorize them. The room shifted. Margaret leaned forward. Her CFO adjusted his glasses, face tightening. Claire continued, flipping open her folder like she was reading bedtime stories for sociopaths. Each invoice was routed through an internal approval system. The access log shows user ID DLANning initiating the draft, then editing the PDF post-export via third-party software. Click Slide 5, a screenshot of the edit trail. Click Slide 6, an internal timestamp showing Derek's IP address, alongside Claire's signature block being inserted at 2:14 a.m. on a Saturday. Click Slide 7, a direct transfer from one of the vendors to a personal checking account belonging to a Charles Lanning, Derek's cousin, listed on LinkedIn as a logistics consultant despite having no web presence and a Yelp review for a defunct vape shop in Tampa. Claire paused. All of these happened within a week of the quarterly performance review Derek submitted for this account, where he cited efficiency improvements. No one spoke. The junior associate to Derek's right was visibly pale. The Halberg attorney whispered something that sounded like Latin for "we're screwed." Derek reached for a water bottle, missed the cap. His hand trembled as he tried to speak. Claire, we can discuss. She raised a hand. Not to stop him, but to dismiss him. I'm still presenting. Click. Slide 8, a timeline, disbursements, IP logins, internal communications, all color-coded, all annotated. At the top, a headline that read, Unauthorized financial movements correlated with executive sign-offs. She turned to Margaret. Would you like a printed copy? Margaret nodded once. Claire slid the packet over, every page sealed in a clear plastic sleeve, each one a nail. These are preliminary findings, Claire said. We're continuing to trace funds, but the current path suggests a pattern of behavior that warrants escalation to external regulators. Derek opened his mouth again. Nothing came out, not because he had no words, but because anything he said would now be part of the official record. And Claire had made damn sure there were plenty of eyes in the room. Margaret closed the folder slowly, looked at Derek. You vouched for this account's integrity. You told me everything was clean. Derek swallowed hard. It was a team effort. Claire smiled just enough to be legal, not this team. A long silence hung in the air, thick as wet concrete. Then Margaret stood. We're pausing all current work with Halberg and Rice effective immediately. Our legal team will be in contact within the hour. She turned to Claire. You'll remain lead auditor for the duration of the investigation. Claire nodded, of course. Derek looked like he might be sick. Claire leaned back in her chair. Calm as ever, she didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The numbers had spoken. The paper trail was pristine, and Derek, he was already dangling. Security didn't march Derek out. That would have been too clean. Instead, 2 of Halberg's legal counsel entered the room mid-silence, exchanged stiff nods with the client team, and gently placed a hand on Derek's shoulder like they were about to announce a death in the family. Derek, let's step out. His jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but no sound came. He glanced toward Margaret, still hoping for some kind of last-minute reprieve. None came. She didn't even look at him. Claire didn't move. She didn't blink. Just kept her hands folded atop her notes, watching the slow-motion removal of a man who once told her flatly, "We promote based on gravitas, not feelings." His footsteps weren't loud, but to Claire they were thunder. The moment the door clicked shut, the room exhaled. Margaret turned to Claire. We'll continue with your team. The board will want full continuity. Beside her, the compliance lead, Dana Keller, a sharp woman with wireframe glasses and a zero bullshit vibe, extended her hand. We'd like to retain your firm, Dana said, then smiled slightly. Minus certain parties. Claire shook her hand. Understood. The audit wrapped with no more objections. No interference. No deflection. Just facts and consequences. Back at Halberg HQ, word spread like fire in a dry cornfield. Derek didn't return to the executive floor. By the time Claire arrived later that afternoon to submit her documentation in person, HR was already deep in damage control mode. A red-faced senior partner was whisper-screaming into his Bluetooth near the elevators. A junior staffer was quietly weeping into her Starbucks in the hallway. Someone had scrubbed Derek's name from the internal Slack channel headers, already replaced with TBD interims. Claire walked through the halls like a surgeon post-op. Calm, precise, clean. As she passed HR, she heard Rebecca's voice, tight, clipped, panicked. Yes, I understand the optics, but we were under the impression Derek's relationships were airtight. Claire didn't stop. On her way to the exit, she saw him, Derek, standing alone in the hallway near the executive conference suite, tie undone, eyes hollow. A man who'd finally realized his name wasn't armor, it was evidence. For a brief second, their eyes almost met. Almost, but he looked down, couldn't hold it, couldn't hold her. Claire didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't offer him the grace of a final word. She adjusted her bag strap, passed by, and paused only long enough to murmur without turning, "Your tie is crooked." And she walked away. One floor down, Anita, Jules, and Martin waited outside a coffee shop across the street, sipping overpriced lattes and scrolling through memes like they hadn't just orchestrated the slow decapitation of a legacy partner. Martin raised his cup. "Is the dragon dead?" Claire exhaled. "He doesn't know it yet, but he would. The internal investigation would spread. The oversight board would keep digging. The clients would start pulling out. Partners would start distancing. The golden boy of Halberg would become a cautionary tale whispered in retreat seminars and HR slide decks. And Claire? She didn't need applause. She didn't need revenge. She had the receipts. And a smile no one could take credit for but her. The invitation came on thick ivory paper, sealed with a gold-embossed logo she'd once seen hanging behind Margaret Serrano's desk. The emblem of the National Oversight Consortium. Not a regulatory agency, exactly, but the closest thing corporate America had to an ethics high council. It was the place firms whispered about when they wanted to dodge subpoenas. Claire opened the envelope with the calm precision of someone unwrapping destiny. "You are hereby appointed chair of the Independent Compliance and Ethics Review Board, under the appointment of board member Margaret Serrano. Your term begins effective immediately." There was no ceremony, no catered celebration, just a private onboarding session in a stark conference suite overlooking a skyline that no longer intimidated her. She took her seat at the head of a glass table on a Tuesday morning in late spring, flanked by names she used to Google for salary benchmarks. The first order of business was routine, a stack of candidate reviews for consulting firm reinstatements. Her assistant placed the file folder in front of her. "Most of these are standard. Just sign off or flag anything questionable." Claire opened the folder and froze, top of the pile. Derek Lanning, new firm, new headshot, same smirk, different story. Apparently, Derek had spent the last few months soul-searching, or more likely, rebranding. His application was full of buzzwords about transformative leadership and lessons learned from adversity. Even included a glowing letter from a boutique PR firm known for scrubbing internet reputations like a magic eraser dipped in money. Claire flipped the page, then flipped it back. She took a breath, not heavy, not angry, just full. And then, like she was signing for pizza delivery, she picked up the pen and wrote a single word across the top of the page. Denied. No gloating, no commentary, just a signature. Just power. Later that afternoon, Margaret popped her head into Claire's new corner office. "You saw the Lanning file?" she asked. Claire looked up from her notes. Briefly, Margaret smiled. "He'll appeal, of course." Claire shrugged. Let him. There was nothing left to fear. No more backroom whispers, no more fragile egos hiding behind tailored suits and pre-written scripts. She'd walked through fire and come out not burned, but forged. Now, when Claire Donovan spoke, boardrooms listened. The only whispers left were about her. On the way out that evening, she passed a lobby TV showing the financial news. A reporter was recapping another firm scandal, rattling off stats about the growing power of ethics panels. And according to Chairman Donovan, oversight must no longer be reactive, it must be relentless. Claire paused to watch herself just for a moment, not out of vanity, but because she'd earned it. She gave the screen a small, private nod and walked out into the city, not as a fixer, not as a survivor, but as the voice they couldn't ignore anymore. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.